Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning and happy Tuesday.
Tuesday it is.
Time flies when you're having fun. Boom. Yeah,
That it
way
does.
early today.
And recordings and conferences and all. It's 3 weeks of major conferences, 3 weeks of events, and we still have to work. So not too bad.
Not
Ooh, that
too
March
bad.
is a busy month.
March has been extremely busy.
Mhm.
With that being said, our main topic for today, let's jump in real quick here for our main topic. Today, we're going to talk about some of our mailbag items. I think we had a couple questions come in here. But we're going to talk about Power BI sharing strategies for external clients. What does that look like? How would you do that? What are the considerations and things that you need there? I've built a lot of these solutions, so I have a lot of opinions about how to make this a seamless, good experience.
And we're in for a treat
Oof.
if we get to it.
If we get to it.
Because it's been so busy.
So let's do some
Because
news.
we've had a lot of recordings, and man, Tommy, we got a lot of news today. So some of these are really interesting topics in and of themselves, but we'll see, Mike, if we even get to the mailbag.
That's true. There's so many things going out.
I don't know, but it's worth talking about it because, like I said, a lot of the pre-recording cuts out on the catch up with the news, and a lot has been pushed out there.
So let's just jump off with, I think, what I would consider like one of the main topics that's occurring right now. Kim Manis, who used to be, I guess, kind of one of the head leaders of the Power BI group, which has now kind of moved up a bit more to product management of, I think, most things Fabric related now. But there is a retirement happening, not for Kim, but for Power BI Premium SKUs. So the Power BI Premium per capacity pricing has been announced that it will be eventually removed in the year 2025. So you have some time to kind of get out of it, but they're deprecating it. They're getting rid of the P SKUs.
Jan 1, 25 is the cutoff, right? So if you have any existing agreements, EA agreements, and before then you can renew.
Yep.
But if they land afterwards, start planning. And there's some sticky stuff to figure out in there sometimes.
And from a purchasing agreement standpoint, it's you're purchasing P SKUs from the Microsoft 365 store. You're purchasing the F SKUs from Azure. Other than that, all the features you need from the P SKUs are available to you in the F SKUs. There is no difference there in function or functionality. If anything, you're getting more functionality with the F SKUs than you will with the P SKUs. Because I think, my opinion here, Microsoft is going to continue investing in those F SKUs and keep making them more featured and not investing all those same features in the P SKUs. So that'll be interesting.
What's crazy is new customers will not be able to purchase Power BI Premium Capacity July 1st this year. So they're deprecating it, but in just a few months, you can't even buy Premium Capacity.
That's going to be
new customers will not be able to. Yeah, you're right. That is not far away. You know what's interesting to me, it strikes me as interesting, and that's why I say, like, man, this could be sticky for existing customers, is because with a lot of the EA agreements, those are done through third parties a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like there are like third parties that have like figured out that, Microsoft licensing is not so easy. If we can do that for customers, they may bundle with us. This rips that out of there.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the impact of that is going to be, but I know that I've definitely used those third parties in the past. And this would be timing that, right, EA agreement in with assuming responsibility for this license for yourself, and that also may change where finance pulls from, right? Like what budget that needs to come from, which will be interesting to work through because I'll have to work through it too.
Yeah, and then other things here too, like some other points to note here is. Yeah, some other things to note here is so it goes to the article here and it talks a little bit about the other different SKUs that are also being affected. So even though we're talking about the P SKUs, I believe the A and the EM SKUs are also going to be somewhat affected here as well. It's not very clearly called out in the article, but it starts talking about there's embedded capacity licensing. They do talk about that a little bit in the premium per user. So premium per user is not going away. Premium per user is not changing. Those things are still the same. But I have suspicion based on what I read here in the article. It looks to me like, okay, the P SKU is done. And because I can embed things down to lower F SKUs, all F SKUs allow for embedding either internal or external for your customers. And because of that, there's no, in my opinion, there's no need now for an A and an EM SKU. It's just overcomplicating the licensing pieces. So
Yeah, I
all that
want to.
kind of disappear.
Yeah, but if so, I want to be really clear. That is, it does not talk about A SKUs yet.
It doesn't a link to another article.
They're very
It
behind the
references
scenes
it.
way.
Mm-hmm.
It references it, but it doesn't say there's a deprecation path, right?
No, they haven't said it's deprecated, but I mean, I'm. This is purely Michael speculating at this point, so I'm just gonna be very clear about this. This is a speculation piece. If the F SKU you get does all the things the A SKU does, and you can go down smaller in size,
Yeah.
as an ISV who's using this solution today currently, I don't see any reason why I'd even need to go buy an A or an EM SKU. So if I'm looking, again, if I'm a purchasing department, I'm purely looking at this from which SKU do I purchase, F, A, or EMs? I get more things with the F SKU. I can go down smaller in the F SKUs. I'm going to choose that over the A SKU. So I think they may not be killing it, but they may be trying to incentivize people to use the new SKU. And then over time, it just eventually just kind of withers out and doesn't be used anymore.
And they didn't mention premium per user at all in this too.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. No,
They said nothing, no changes.
Capacities.
Impact on Power BI licensing, last paragraph.
No changing.
Okay.
So PPU stays the same.
So what's interesting to me though is I wonder if that was intentional or just like, we're not going to push on the A SKU quite yet, because if you like, those are embedded SKUs. I would agree. You have entire production facing reports that are embedded in applications.
I'd agree with that.
And this would be like, this is a short-term abrupt announcement. July, you can't buy it anymore, right? Like at end of year, which is what, 6 and some months, 6 and change away from the end of the year. You have to go through cycles just to ensure that, okay, I'm gonna move all my dev onto new F SKU capacity. Everything's running as assumed. And then we have a production kind of pushover, and just to make sure that everything's running as like. And I'm not. It could be easy, right? I don't know that them leaving it out or not pushing that button right away is because of that. But production deployments, you get a little bit more. Handsy about, like, I don't know, focused on those things. But I would agree with you. I mean, from a customer perspective, outside of the two things I mentioned with, how licensing is managed with external parties and or where financing pulls it from, the flexibility that the F SKU provides, I'm stoked about. Like, that was, we talked about the P SKU a long time ago, and it was just a bear because, like, man, like, why would we not have something like the A SKU or the A SKU that we could control, that we could burst up and down, that we could, do all these things with, and now it's here, right? So now, like, taking that P capacity, now it's all managed in the same spot. I personally I'm way okay and fine with migrating onto F SKUs.
I agree with that one. So I think this is a major announcement. The only thing really major to point out here is, hey, things are changing. Pay attention. It's basically what we're trying to say here. Is like you need to know what pricing you have, what are you working on right now currently, and go talk to your representatives, go talk to your consultants, go talk to someone who knows what's going on here, because they will have to be investigating this anyway for you. So make sure you reach out, ask them for help, because there is also some things here as well. A P SKU is $5,000. If you bought the equivalent F64 directly from Azure, it's going to be $8,000. So the price is more unless you add the reserved pricing. So there's a discount given for committing to longer periods of time on those various SKUs. And so you have to incorporate reserved pricing. And then the price of the F SKUs, again, an F64, I think in the US goes down to about like, $5,040. It's like $40 more. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? So again, just make sure you have people who are pricing things appropriate for you. You can move to the new SKUs without much impact on price or cost, and you get more features and all the new features that are coming out through Fabric, which are Azure only features that are kind of coming. Like I think they mentioned in the article, there's a managed instance, not managed. There's a managed resource group. Here it's talking about trusted workspaces in OneLake shortcuts. So are some specific Fabric features that you're going to get, and you get a managed private endpoint for Spark. These are things that are coming out that you can use in these new SKUs.
I think in the other, well, to your point, right? They are now putting these under the Microsoft Azure consumption commitments, right? Like that's where you get your discounts with Microsoft. So leverage those, right? So the FSKUs falling under those, that's really good news for a lot of customers. And to your point, Mike, it can reduce the cost from P into F, which is a good thing. And equivalency wise, like there's no loss here. It's the same stuff under the hood and more in terms of like what the capacity can support versus the P capacity.
So that's one of our first main articles here. Let's take on the next one here. So Tommy's favorite topic here. I'll let Tommy do this next one.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we wanted to skip it or not, but of course, hey, guess what? Improved PowerPoint add-in or Power BI add-in for PowerPoint. This is a new idea where we can actually take a snapshot of the Power BI report. So if you ever use a Power BI plugin for PowerPoint, it basically saves the state of the report that you're in once you go to the slideshow. Kind of like a personal bookmark. However, anyone would be able to select it and interact with that said report. There's a new feature or new control where it can actually say, you know what, make it a snapshot so it basically behaves as an image. So, for example, if I'm sharing this PowerPoint and I have a bunch of Power BI visuals in here or that using the plugin, and I just want it to be static, at least for the presentation or what people are seeing, we can now save that view mode. That's pretty big because we've had.
Is it pretty big?
Well, it's not as big as the Fabric thing, but I think it's okay.
I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing you because it's in PowerPoint. I'm like,
yeah,
why?
We're all waiting for OneNote and Spark.
Yeah, I was just.
I know. No one cares about the business.
No one cares about PowerPoint. I'm sorry.
Yes. So if it doesn't say Spark or Pandas, then I don't care. So
if it says anything about PowerPoint, I'm not as thrilled. Just
Yeah. But I think for business users, the ability to save the state of that report so no one can touch it, so to speak. I've gotten it just right. It makes it a little easier to interact with and to kind of make sure that nothing modifies.
It feels like they're continually. I mean, this has been a continual theme here for the last couple months now. They've been slowly adding more features, trying to make PowerPoint more seamless with Power BI reports. The part of this that I really struggle with is like a Power BI report takes the context of a user, who the user is logged in as. That context is used to render the report. It's a security mechanism, and PowerPoint slides are notorious for. I can send them anywhere I want. I can put an image in there of whatever I need to, and it just gets sent around, shared however you want to share the PowerPoint slide. That doesn't, to me, like the security model of Power BI and PowerPoint just doesn't fit very well together. And I get it, but I don't know. I don't love Power BI inside PowerPoint. I realize people want to do it and it needs to be there. I get it. I'm just not a fan.
There are three different controls. There's live view, which is what we're used to. There's this idea called snapshot, which only people who have access to the report can view it. And then you can create a public snapshot, which actually creates an image and anyone can view that image. So just be cautious if you're sharing this with a lot of people. If you make it public snapshot,
how is public snapshot agreeable to any organization?
No. Well, listen. The way I'm reading this is the snapshot still requires that the user have access to the report, right?
Not in public snapshot.
Anyone could
just the normal snapshot.
Image.
Sure.
Yeah, the live one.
So public meaning anybody in the org, anybody who've used the PowerPoint. Like my guess is this comes from, like, if you think about the audience of PowerPoint, it's not Power BI users usually, right? PowerPoint is being used as a reporting page snap. Like my wife does this all the time. She's in, she does forecasting. She spends her life in Power BI reports looking at how,
And you got a
filtering,
happy
blah, blah,
household.
which is
I know, that would be
hilarious.
so nice.
Hilarious,
I would have,
given the past of like PowerPoint stuff. Like in her new job she took over a year ago, it's like all powered. That's all. Every time I walk in her office, that's what she's doing. And what she does is she snapshot, like she takes a snippet and snips the reports
Mhm.
out of the PowerPoint and puts them in a slide deck, because this is how like they want to communicate it to organizational leaders or to show different things. And I think the feedback within the loop here related to the experience of users trying to embed reporting in PowerPoint is such that it's probably a pain, because it's like, oh man, like so and so after the presentation couldn't see the report anymore
Mhm.
because they weren't logged in and they didn't have permissions. And like, yeah, what kind of mess would that be? So from the public snapshot perspective, no, it's not public to the world. It's public to the internal organization, those who have access to the PowerPoint. So if they want to see the slide retroactively, like this makes a ton of sense to me. Plus, it removes that, like the fear factor for like, I'm presenting, I gotta, stuff's all in place, and then I get to my go-to slide where I'm pulling up my report, and
Yeah, and the report's all different. Data refreshed.
No, or it's like problems logging in, or it's the screen that like crap, I forgot to log in and I need to, or whatever the case may. It removes that.
Mhm.
And in that part, I really like this. I think it's a good improvement to the solution of like trying to leverage Power BI as the reporting, screenshots that you're going to use to reinforce a point or put in a PowerPoint slide, and like removing that connection issue kind of stuff. It makes it more useful in the tool.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, and I think this is what kind of what my point was earlier, was they're doing a better job of refining the experience. They're making it easier. They're trying to sand off those rough edges so that it is, to your point, Seth, like it's not as rough getting into the report and you actually want you to use. It's just not. It's not built for PowerPoints and slides. This is just a good helpful way of getting there. So, anyways, not loving it. It is what it is.
That's because.
Well,
So
let's move on.
do you
don't like
here's,
this.
Here's a random question. Like when you're engaging with new clients, when you're presenting anything, do you ever use PowerPoint?
No, never.
You use Power BI reports.
I use whiteboard experiences. So I use Miro, which is one of my favorite tools to use right now with clients. I've got a nice little pattern that I use. I have all the icons I need in there. I've got it prepared. So if I'm ever talking to clients about things like that, I'm presenting things there solely in that. I don't use PowerPoint slides anymore. I've the class that I run for adoption and governance, I've abandoned all PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, but that's already when you're in the door. Like nobody's got a, hey Mike, I'd like you to present to this, this executive team and like show us what you're going to do for us.
Yep. I'm not using slides. I'm building it in other things. I hate PowerPoint so much. It's such a stinking time suck for me. It's so useless.
Wow.
Yeah.
I personally don't agree with you, but hey, if you've found mechanisms outside to present ideas, thoughts, and where you're going to go with things, it's cool.
And I think the neat part about the way I present things now is using these newer, more whiteboardy-esque type tools. I can prepare all of my thoughts as screens, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But usually there's questions along the way around, what about this? And in our situation, we don't have that. And here we have, so we literally take from that, like imagine taking a PowerPoint slide where you have things or ideas or concepts you're trying to convey, and then you go immediately into the next deeper level and say, okay, let's explore what you're talking about. And you can literally rearrange the icons and the groups of things, and then you add bubbles or nuggets or diagram pieces there in real time with them and say, well, here's what you're saying. You're saying, yeah, I heard you say this. This is what we're now talking about now. This is how you would design things.
You're almost diagramming right out of the gate.
Almost right away. And I think that adds, I'll say this too. I do a lot less sales pitching. Like there's not a lot of sales pitching that I do. It's more about, most of my workload is get in, we got problems, figure stuff out. I need architectural diagrams.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're past that.
I'm already past that.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Ma-
you being past that makes a ton of sense, because like then you're instantly in almost conceptual model mode,
Yeah,
right?
correct. Yes.
Where you're like, here's the pieces, here's how we're going to approach this, yada
Yes.
yada yada, as
Yeah.
opposed to show
Who
us
are
that you
you?
actually, yeah.
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 It's because I'm on the podcast. I'm like, do you have a podcast with over 300 episodes? No. Okay, then we're just going to move forward.
Maybe I'm in the wrong business here.
We don't need slides. We don't need slides anymore. We're done with those. So, it is good. I like this is
Okay.
Some people are going to enjoy this feature, just not me.
Well, if you didn't like this one, do I have one right down your alley? Bridging Fabric Lakehouses, Delta Change data feed for seamless ETL. This
Now we're talking.
Yeah, exactly. Delta.
Now we're talking. I'm happy now.
Naturally, it's great.
This is a change data feed. So in certain systems, not all systems, I believe if I read this article correctly, the change data feed is every time you update or delete or make a record adjustment, systems will capture that and send that could send that messaging somewhere as a feed. Hey, I updated record 10. Hey, we added record 11. Record 11 was updated. All right, record 5 was deleted. So all of those individual commands make up what is the current state of that table. So I think that's technically I think what's happening there, but I don't know. I think this makes sense. I think people are going to find this useful. It heavily depends on, can you trust your source system, or does your source system correctly spit out the right information?
I'm really amazed how many updates the Microsoft team is coming on. I have no idea how hard this is to implement, but every month they are coming out with some, it seems like either major feature that they're integrating that was previously available in Synapse or something new. They are doing that. This is way more updates than the Power BI back in the day on a monthly basis.
Why do you think that is?
Because they're spending a lot of money to get this working. Tell me, is this the web?
No.
What?
How many services are in Fabric?
Yeah.
They've pulled in a lot of other teams.
So like,
that are like
7 to 9 services. All of these services are the independent teams that were building those services. So the fact that like all of these are getting integrated, and we're seeing an absolute torrent of feature updates where those independent services already have features that don't work yet in Fabric and now are working in Fabric. It's 9 times the people, right? So like of course there's more updates than there were with just the Power BI team.
Yeah. They didn't take the Power BI team and say, we're just going to like divide you.
Right.
I think what they did is they divided the Power BI team, and then they added a bunch of other, like Azure Data Factory, ADF. There's team members from now on that probably working on things. There's probably team members now working on, the Spark engine. There's a whole team there like that. Microsoft already had a Spark engine somewhere else. It was in Synapse, so they're probably pulling team members partly from there as well. So like, yeah, it feels like they're really centralizing around the theme of Power BI, and this is a truly platform as a system now. And all the teams, Fabric is now a platform as a separate system, and now they're really trying to say, let's pull all the teams in and make a platform, as opposed to here's a bunch of data engineering services that you could use independently. I think it makes sense. I like it.
Well, I think it makes sense too. It makes for some really long blog articles.
Well, this one in particularly, this blog article is quite long because it's got a lot of like code samples and showing some things in notebooks, and so really like this one from that standpoint, from a technical side. But anyways, it's just nice to know that this is out and available now.
I do think the interesting thing to me, and I think we mentioned this in a previous conversation, was that having each of these individual tools, I think you had your experts in, but if you weren't using them, you would never know, right? So even this change data capture being introduced into Fabric, I really enjoy, even though some of these articles are really long or announcements, the fact that it's bringing forth more features that you may not have been aware of in those other tools had you not used them. And that is really powerful in Fabric because you can leverage them, even if you are a hardcore SQL warehouse person, right?
Agree.
Oh, wow, Lakehouse, this thing has this thing. What am I going to do? Go connect to the same tables that I built in my SQL warehouse right over here. It's the same object. All I have to do is introduce this new benefit or a new ETL pattern or new, ML on top of that table, and now it's part of my ETL pipeline. That's huge, and I think that's going to accelerate as people start to understand just the different dynamics that this inclusive environment of all of these different tools and technologies on top of Delta, like really, really unlocks even further capabilities of ETL teams and data in general.
That's a great segue. Oh, go ahead.
Donald makes a point here around ADF is dead-ish. Pretty sure Fabric pipelines are the future and now mainly in the present usage here. What are your feelings on Azure Data Factory? Do you feel like that's something that's gone by the wayside and it's being fully replaced or could be fully replaced by what pipelines are doing inside Fabric?
I think it depends on I think it depends on two things. The more like data sources and how they start to treat those in Fabric, because if they make it easy to connect to and pull data in whatever form, yeah, I mean, like you don't need an independent system, right? It's the same with all the other systems, though, right? Like, there's a lot to be excited about. I'll say that, but it just depends on how Microsoft treats those data sources and how fast we can start to utilize, the information.
Well, that's an excellent segue to other major updates about the data sources, making it easier. Browse Azure resources with Get Data, where we can actually make it a lot easier to connect to Synapse, Data Lake Gen 2, and Azure Blobs. There's a better UI rather than focusing all on getting the connection string. There's always a pain in the butt. But now the user interface is going to be a lot more improved to make it discoverable. Along with that, we also get bring Fabric Lakehouses to Dataverse, which is also another neat thing where the improved link between Dataverse and Fabric continues to evolve. So let me get that article.
So I'm interested in the one here around the connecting things in Azure. I think that's actually a really relevant. This is something that should have been out a while ago from a connector standpoint. You should be able to go, here's a blob store. Here's Azure-based data things. Go connect to them. Make it easy for me. Like that's very. I think this one's very helpful. Really enjoyed that one.
The Dataverse is nothing to sneeze at either. Just for the sake that we know the pain it is to try to analyze CRM-based data from Dynamics or from the Dataverse, but now we can push that into a Lakehouse. So to me, there's a lot of I would call this underlying or unattended benefits of this that we haven't thought of, because it's always been so hard to utilize the Dataverse from a reporting point of view. It's not meant to be, but we really have a lot of good information. Usually a lot of organizations have true things. Dataverse, Power Platform, it's basically the upgrade to Dynamics.
Yes. So the interesting thing about the Dataverse thing is this is in this feature they're talking about here, they're looking at it and they're saying, hey, that you can create a new shortcut. So you're basically shortcutting to where the Dataverse data lives. So I guess that means since it's a shortcut, it's always looking at the freshest data coming from that resource, potentially, because it's a shortcut. Interesting.
Which article are you guys talking about?
I just sent it in the chat and it's in Teams.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
You're playing on the fly games.
I thought I had it. I had 6 links.
You didn't have it in the linked list, Tommy. So
got it.
Please refer to
it's there now.
Yep.
This is an interesting feature, and I'm pretty pleased that this is here. I think this is going to remove some more friction from those Dataverse customers that are already trying to think about and leverage this data. We are working on some projects right now around Dataverse, and yeah, it's got a little bit of hiccup in it, but it's getting smoother and smoother the more you move towards Fabric. So I think it's getting better and better as they build this. So this is just a rounding out feature enhancement of this. And I do like this. So there's a concept of, I like going into Dataverse, grabbing the SQL Analytics endpoint So the shortcut's there. I can see the table. I can see the data in it, and then I can write SQL against it, and then do what I want with the data after the SQL. So if I want to join tables, I want to clean stuff out. That makes a lot of sense to me because now I can go see those tables and bring them in. So I think this is going to be really impactful. I like this feature a lot, actually.
Yeah, I would agree. And this also dovetails though into Donald's comment about ADF, right? More things like this, shortcuts where I can connect to Dataverse or other objects where my data sits there and I don't have to copy it right through because ADF, like 90% of everything that we're doing right out of the gate is what? Copying data. Copy data into our lake. And with a shortcut here, right, data sits in its existing state. So all you're doing is figuring out how do you have to pull it, or I should say, transform for a version in your lake or the shortcut. And that is something that I think is really cool.
Excellent.
Or powerful, not just cool.
Yeah, I would agree. Very powerful. With that, I think we've definitely beat up the news quite enough here. We've almost taken half the time here just talking through. There was so much to go over. It's absolutely incredible how many things were occurring here on the news side of things. So let's maybe transition over to our main topic here a little bit. And Tommy, you said this is a mailbag. I guess I should kick this over to Seth here, and we should have Mailbag Seth read the question out for us, so we can talk about the question today.
I'm gonna read a comment first because it makes me feel good.
All right, yeah.
So apologies for the name. Junaidi says, "Hey guys, I started listening to you guys a few weeks back and landed a job working around Power BI. Thank you so much for all the knowledge you guys are sharing. It opens my eyes to a lot of things." Well, thank you for listening. That is great news, and congratulations on the new job. And if we in some way, shape, or form helped out with that,
our word of advice as you start your new job is stay away from PowerPoint and Power BI reports.
And just don't say you learned your skills from the podcast.
Yeah, and if it doesn't go well, you didn't hear about us or the podcast. It wasn't us. So funny. Best of wishes on your new job. Very happy that you got the position. Keep up the good work, and hope you can. Hope the podcast keeps putting you in the right direction around things that are interesting and relevant for your work. So this might, maybe the next topic the rest of today will be a part of that as well.
On to the mailbag. Question of the day is: can you talk more about how different Power BI solutions are shared for seamless user experience? Particularly, I am interested in knowing how I can use my reporting as a product/service for analytic reports that we have created for external users, in brackets, clients.
All right. So this is talking about embedding your reports for external users.
Well, how? Probably, but that's not the only way, right?
Yeah. It's not the only way.
I don't think he.
So have at it, gents.
So out of the box, Microsoft does provide you the ability to add guests or guest users into your Power BI tenant, which allows you to bring external people into your ecosystem. I'm going to say that comes with some challenges right out of the gate. You need licensing for them. They need to be in your tenant. Your Active Directory will actually have to absorb those users into your Active Directory. So at the end of the day, someone needs to be authenticated to figure out who you are and what you're doing inside that tenant. So a lot of times, some companies have policies around this. Actually, I find more companies than less companies have a lot of policies around this, where they are saying, hey, we're not going to let external users show up and we don't want them in our Active Directory tenant as a guest. Even if they are a guest and they have limited access, there's potentially either it's clouding the tenant, there's too much in the Entra ID space, they want to keep it clean. Like that should be for internal employees only. But that is a possibility. You can pay for users to have that experience so they can go into your Power BI tenant and get access to reports. Have you guys used any of this with clients so far? Have you found good success with this today?
So I was thinking about all the different cases of doing external sharing, both embedded to just the B2B access guest users. And I think if you had one of those business diagrams where easy to hard and feature set, I think that sharing the individual reports or sharing content with guest users, while pretty straightforward, as long as IT is okay with it, doesn't scale. But it does. It is pretty simple. They simply act as other users, and we have used that when it's a small group of users that need access. Their experience is a little different. That you're actually in your organization's domain, so it's a separate URL. You can't get to the reports from your own tenant. So, Mike, let's say you shared with me a report from your tenant. I can't go in my Power BI and find your reports. I can find the semantic models, but I actually have to go to a specific URL. So it's not really the best experience, but it is the most straightforward. And we've done it a ton. But then that it ramps up in terms of making the feature set more interactive and better from the difficulty and the actual prereqs when it comes to embedding, when it comes to utilizing more features in Entra. It's not Active Directory anymore, so I'm just going to start changing that name too. But there's a lot more configuration that you need to utilize your IT team with. It's not something that you can do on your own. So yeah, we've used it. The individual guest access, B2B users. But when it comes to embedding, Seth, you know a ton about this. Mike, you got an amazing application that allows easily, which I'm amazed that something like that's not already out there.
Oh, there's a number of companies out there doing full ISV embedded accelerator solutions now. So that's out there. Go ahead, Seth.
I mean, you're gonna talk for a lot.
No, so I was just gonna make a comment on Tommy's thing real quick.
Go ahead.
The biggest barrier I see to doing embedded with PowerBI.com is the licensing. Most companies don't want to pay $10 per user to at least to show up and get things out of PowerBI.com. That's the main hurdle that I observe from companies doing that.
I mean, we're talking about the two scenarios where essentially either you're sharing externally and there's an experience there, or bringing users into your domain with a domain account. Like you're saying, you're setting them up as, Tommy at PowerBI.tips, but they're an external user. That's the second scenario, so they have a better user experience.
Yeah, you'd have to create a whole account. I can utilize my Poolia BI, and Mike can share that with me, which is seamless. It wouldn't be a new user; it would be adding existing.
You're not creating a new account.
Right.
You're creating a guest account, which is their email address at your domain. So it's like, Tommy's full email address at, a different domain's name at powerbitips.com. So it's basically making an entire account that is unique to that user, even though you're logging in from a different tenant. So it does allow you to have other tenant IDs, but you still have to bring in enough of that user to bring them into your tenant as a guest.
And that guest user has the same Power BI experience.
It will have the PowerBI.com experience, like the same one if you go to app.powerbi.com, except you need to have a license for them. So as long as you give them a pro user license, you can give them access to a workspace. You can have them log into the Power BI tenant, and then they can see their apps they've been published to. Like all the PowerBI.com things just work for them. So they can be added in there. You could also, again, if you don't want to pay that licensing, I believe you could also do the same thing at a F64 level. So at F64, you get that experience by paying for the F64, and then you get all the PowerBI.com experience. Go here. Here's all the apps that you can go use. Again, to Tommy's point, the only way to get people in easily there is there's a lot of confusion around, well, Michael has his tenant, Tommy has his tenant. How do I know which PowerBI.com to log into? It's more difficult getting them to the right URL. That's tricky.
But then again, the other caveat, if you utilize the guest user, I can bring my own license. So
I've never had that work correctly. I don't know why that
Really?
doesn't work. I've never had it work.
Dude, we had so many situations with Power Apps that people needed access. We're like, do you have a license? No, do you have a license? It's worked for us. I've never had an issue with that.
Yeah, I've never been able, it's supposed to work. Like if your tenant has a license and you show up, it should just work. But I've had all kinds of issues with things getting blocked. Maybe I haven't tested it most thoroughly enough. It may work for some people, but I have not had much success with that. It's just been too confusing to get set up correctly.
So I think in the past we've tested, and this was a while ago, we tested pretty hard how to the other scenario here, which is maybe not an external customer.
Mhm.
It's where you have multiple tenants in the same company, right? And I want a singular shared Power BI experience. Nah,
Nope.
can't have it, right?
Can't have
so
it.
that the one that's super painful is just keeping external users or sharing any content with them.
Mhm.
Because like to your earlier point, sharing a URL, especially if they have their own Power BI environment and that's how they have to interact with your reports, is a really poor experience, right? I'm not, especially if it's supposed to be built into a solution where you have 10 reports because you're a customer. Oh yeah, well those are just 10 links and there's not a location that you can go to, navigate to those, etc. I can honestly say I don't think I really like got deep into the guest account and per licensing to try to create the same experience, especially not in like the tenant things, because I was trying to like consolidate into a single experience.
Yeah.
And that would just keep two different experiences. I'd have to go to two different Power BI tenants.
Yes, which again, I would argue that that's not a deal either. Like
it isn't,
Mm-mm.
especially when people are you're training and teaching people new things. Imagine saying like, well, it is Power BI,
that
but
report is in this tenant.
that's you have to go over here for that one. Like
Yeah.
businesses, they're not gonna be like, yeah, make that happen.
I have found any company that has multiple Power BI tenants. So this is like your domain names, right? So if there's like companies that have merges, anytime I've seen companies with multiple tenants, this gets really confusing.
Yeah.
And this gets really difficult for this to work. So all of this is like, let's say this is like level 1. This is the easy button for getting people access to reports. You do have to make some compromises around licensing. You also have to make some compromises around letting guest users into your environment. There's also a whole bunch of a handful of admin settings you need to turn on for guest users to do things inside your Power BI environment. Honestly, in my opinion, if you're just trying to share reports with people, I don't really love that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Then beyond that, so moving forward from that one is, then you have the custom embedded solutions. So now you can then make a ISV type solution and you can embed your reports into a web application. And then you have to build a lot of functionality or feature sets that come to your embedded application that mimic a lot of the behaviors from Power BI.com. Right. And that's where you get, so what this does is it starts pulling back the veil of like customization and design and all the things you want to do from embedding that gives you the capability of doing whatever you think of, whatever you can dream of. You can now do all these extra things that go along with an application. And that's, I mean, my opinion here, it's more work for the developers. I have done this work, probably 14 or 15 embedded projects at this point. I'm very comfortable with it. But for many organizations, this is a very large lift to get them to do this.
It's a large lift. So for if this question comes from, hey, I'm a BI person and I need to solve this customer facing solution.
Correct.
Buckle up.
This is not
like
the first.
Either
not
like
first
we're talking like in order to make that happen, like I hope you have a developer.
You need one. Yes.
Right? Because otherwise you're in for a long road of trying to figure out how to go build an application and have your reports plugged in here. On the flip side, if you have developers and you have a custom app experience, the embedded solution can do a lot, right?
A lot.
I currently have an embedded solution in our organization that works seamlessly with the application itself. So it's doing things that the application has an idea of a whole bunch of context of data that doesn't live in the model, and we're messaging back and forth between the model and what the application is doing. And there are some really cool experiences you can build, but it is it's dev time. Like you're going to have to develop an experience where Power BI is communicating back and forth with the application in a really seamless way. And that is not easy to do and nigh impossible, and not even really an option if you're just a BI person.
Correct. And I'd also argue this, I mean, around this embedded solution, right? what happens, in the Power.com service, there's a lot of management of users and bookmarks and data and all these other things that are helping you use that experience. So there's two main embedded experience. There's the app owns data, and then there is the user owns data experience. And so the one that I like the most is the app owns the data experience. It gives you the most amount of flexibility of control around row level security. The app can do a lot more things. You can do pre-filtering for the app before the report shows up inside the report pages. There's a whole bunch of more things you have to do. However, a lot of the Power.com stuff just comes as APIs, and you have to build your own experience on what you think is the best for the reporting surface area. So being that said, that's where I spent most of my time. I've spent most of my time just focusing on the embedded experience, and because of this, I have built a solution that actually accelerates you beyond like, hey, you need embedding. Great, you can buy embedding from me on a per user basis, right? Basically, a embedded as a service, or you can go buy an application that has all that information in it. So there's a lot of really good solutions out there that do that already. And then you just can kind of pick the features that you need in the application to get those features directly for your.
So I want to lean into here for a second.
Yeah.
You're saying you and or potentially other third parties have easy button solutions for BI people to embed get their reports into an embedded scenario.
Correct. Yes. And that's the thing. I think that's the secret sauce here, right? I mean, I've worked on teams.
There's obviously a lot of open white space between the Power BI solution and what people need. And
exactly.
You're saying you and others have filled that need with the tooling that you have.
Correct.
It's not. I'm calling it out because, yes, I'm aware of it, but at the same time, like if you're a BI person, there's a cost here.
Correct.
Right. You're not going to get a freebie. Like there's no freebie solution to build an external facing Power BI solution that is a good one.
Agree.
Right. So I'm looking at Tommy's face as he's like,
well, no,
like
if you actually look at the question that was asked in the mailbag. Talk about all the different Power BI solutions for a seamless user experience. I really don't think there's a really truly a seamless one and a fully integrated one. It's fine for sharing a few reports with external users, but
I disagree. I think the embedded experience is way more than that. Yeah, I'm gonna
living from the I'm saying keeping the same theme of Power BI service. Yeah, you can build anything.
No, I'm talking like seamless experience of like your application, like you provide deep links, you're going into other parts of your application, like you can embed a single, like, well, I'll say it this way. The theme generator that we've built at themes.powerbitips is really integrated. We have this entire web app building experience, and you don't even know where the web app begins and where Power BI begins. It is so well integrated. You click on different visuals pop up, you stylize them, they immediately change in front of your eyes. Like, it doesn't even look like Power BI service. So, I mean, the amount, again, to get to that level though, you really need to know the APIs. You really need to know what you're doing inside Power BI to get to that level. So from that standpoint, I feel really confident that you can highly stylize the experience where you can blur the lines so much between, again, it's more about your application and then giving the people what they want in the reports. Now you have the control to actually build what users need, which is, look, use my application, my whatever I've built. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to deeply integrate key pieces of data around the entire application all over the place. So I think that is more relevant. And you just have to be very meticulous around playing all that out because there's a lot. Again, this is not, to your point, Seth, a BI developer showing at this one. This is not their solution. This is an app developer working with someone who knows all the APIs and how to make everything work. I have personally experienced 4 to 6 months of external teams trying to develop this on their own. I even heard stories of going 9 to 12 months just to get one of these things off the ground. Yeah, like enough that people can use it. It is a lift.
I've lived this as well. It's true. There are teams of people. So listen. Can you share content outside of Power BI? Yes, you can. Can you create a seamless, fantastic customer experience with your reports for free? Not that I'm aware of, right? So your routes are either you get in touch with the developer and you have a lot of time to build your solution, which is entirely, you now own the building of that solution for your customer, or you pick solutions that are already preformed that you can plug into. And it sounds like I'm familiar. There are some really great experiences, but they come at a cost. But at the same time, like that would be something that you're transferring to the customer in
Hopefully.
part of that solution. Hopefully.
I mean, I'd like to think of this as like you're selling data and analytics to your customers as like, here's an opportunity. This is an upsell for you, Mr. Customer. One of these things I think that's really important here is just understand, like, you're making reports. You've spent so much time doing that. You've made the reports, you've made the data sets, you're getting them refreshing, you're doing all this engineering work to get stuff where your internal team can use it. You should be thinking about this like fairly soon after you get that up and running. Once you have your internals kind of running on Power BI, this should be a very clear and easy stepping stone to go from there. Start thinking about, how do I then do the same thing for my customers? And I think embedded is that experience. I think it's a really good one, and you got to really plug in with the people who know what's going on so you can actually get that rich experience that you want. All right. I think this is a great question. I hope that touches on a couple things. There's internal systems that do that, and you can do Power BI embedded through custom web apps, which is a lot harder. I know we're running out of time. People got to run and go do meetings and stuff today. So we do thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed today's topic. We had a lot of news today, a lot of things coming out in the Power BI ecosystem. I hope you're as excited as we are. I think this year is going to be a really interesting year for Fabric. I think we're going to see a lot of maturing of the product, which makes you really excited to see where they're going to take the product now. So very excited for that part. Our only ask is, if you like this podcast, if you enjoyed what you were hearing here and learned something new, we really appreciate it. Please share this with somebody else. Let's share it with someone else. Let them know that you are enjoying the podcast and that you're getting some value out of it. With that, Tommy, where else can you hear about the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question idea or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to Power BI Tips/podcast and leave your name. Please leave your name. We don't know who to thank. And a great question. Finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7 or 7:30, and join the conversation live on all Power BI Tips social media channels.
Excellent. Thank you. Awesome. Appreciate you all so much. We thank you for your time, and we'll catch you next time.